Werewolf slapped my mother. Or, my mother slapped a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I saw my mother slap a werewolf-looking mofo, and I swear I saw that dog-headed guy haul off and return the favor, too. This happened so long ago. I bet half of you won't even believe people were alive back then. I remember this was after World War II because my father had been back with us just before this happened. I guess I need to explain the situation this occurred in for it to make even the slightest bit of sense. Although I hate backstory. If you want to skip ahead, I'll be honest. That's probably what I would do. I'll also be honest in saying that you might not understand the rest of this very well if you do. I was born in the year of our Lord 1940, and I outlived my usefulness years ago. When people ask me how I stayed alive so long, I tell them the truth. I don't let doctors near me. Everything doctors touch dies. You ever notice that? I did. So I figured the longer I avoid those bloodsuckers, the longer I get to live. Like I said, I'm beyond being useful to society. But this story happened before I ever became useful in the first place. I was really young when this happened, like 7 or 8 or 9. I remember it partially from the retellings of the story, almost more than my original memories. I know it was one of the times my older sister was staying with my father and he was off in another house in another state. My parents never officially got divorced because my mother refused to allow it. And both sides had to agree in those days. At least that was what I remember my father telling me about it. He came back from WW2 so happy and excited, and my mother took only about 2 or 3 weeks to drain all the happiness out of that man. Dad used to call her a piece of work, but I can't even repeat the things Mom used to call him. Some of them might get you in trouble on YouTube, and I think a few of them might even be illegal to say now behind the Iron Curtain in backward nations, like, Scotland and Canada. Mom's explanation for why Dad kept leaving her involved him preferring men over women. I stayed with him a number of times for a few weeks at a time, though, and I only ever saw him dating women for what that's worth. But this was back in the 1940s, and it was considered an insult to say those things in those days. She was just trying to insult the guy, and she couldn't see how treating him like that might make him want to live elsewhere. Mom never understood that she had any responsibility at all to think about anyone else's feelings. She always had some reason to look down on everyone, and since we were all so far beneath her, then it was not her responsibility to care if she made us cry or if she broke up her own family to satisfy her Texas-sized ego. So Mom was a narcissist and an egomaniac, but she was also a poor woman with 2 kids. She was a hard worker. She had no choice. We lived in a tiny 2-floor house, and we lived off of whatever money Dad could let us have. Mom would do laundry for neighbors in the area in exchange for food or other favors like repair work around the house. We did have electricity in the early days, but I remember it got turned off the same week my friend at school's family bought their first TV set. So we got to stand outside the windows of stores, looking in at these amazing newfangled TV set contraptions, but we could never think of owning one. First, we would have had to raise the money to get the electricity turned back on. But we didn't complain. We were living in the modern age. If we needed to make a telephone call, all we had to do was walk into town and bum a dime off someone to use a payphone. I mean, we were living in a space age. Okay, I think you get the picture. We were poor. It was a good time in America, but not for us. We didn't have TV, but when we could afford to buy an old-fashioned number 6 battery, we could hook wires up to the top of it and run this 20-year-old battery-operated radio that we had. Yes, they made battery-operated radios way back in the 20s and 30s. It's just that the batteries were bigger than the entire radios that came out later during the transistor age. But we weren't quite living in the transistor age yet. I didn't know anyone who wasn't skinny and hungry. Not even the animals around there. One day my lunch bag got stolen from me by a pack of wild dogs. I just had to go hungry that day. I remember my stomach growling loudly in class, and the teacher making fun of me for being poor. All the kids laughed, even the ones I had thought were my friends. I was poor, and for some reason that was funny. Not to me, but to everyone else. Even to the dog man. Okay, I think I'm caught up now. My sister was away with Dad, I was home with Mom, and that was not a fun place to be. Even when there wasn't crime and roving wild dog packs, my mother would make things feel horrible, all the time, for no reason at all. If you laughed about anything, she would shout at you, until you were as unhappy as she was. I once got sent to bed without supper for laughing out loud at a newspaper or comic strip. I don't know if you know what either of those things were, newspaper or comic strip, but I'm sure you could ask an AI chatbot to explain it to you. So one day I was just getting home from school when I saw my mother out back hanging up the laundry. I used to usually go in using the back door, but when I saw Mom back there I used the front door in hopes of putting off having to actually talk to her and get a stomachache for no reason whatsoever. Do you know anyone like that? You feel sick just having to be around them? That was my dear old Mom. Her most famous quote was, "Wipe that smile off your stupid face," usually coupled with accusations of one sort or another to put you instantly on the defensive. So like I said, I was about to cut around to the front of the house when I saw something out of the corner of my eye that caused me to just stop what I was doing and stare wide-eyed and open-jawed. I saw what I at first thought was a bear, but a bear that had a weird body shape more like a human. Thinner than a bear, but definitely not thin. He looked like Superman, but covered in gray to black shiny fur. And his head, well, you can tell me what his head looked like. It looked like the head of a dog or a wolf, but one that either walked in from the dinosaur age or maybe from hell itself. Fangs too large for his dog's snout, eyes too scary and angry for a neighborhood pooch. I took one step toward the backyard to warn my mother, but before I could take a second step, the dog thing stepped out of the woods and walked right over to my mom. He looked like he was storming over to her, like he had some sort of score to settle. He looked like he was familiar already with my mother somehow. I just stood there watching as he attempted to sneak up behind her, but my mother whirled around, banging the big muscular furry dog-headed man with a broom that she seemed to have with her. I watched the dogman or wolfman throw the broom away and grab my mother by the wrist. She was shouting at that dogman the same way she shouted at my father, and it was clear she had no fear of this wild beast man. I would like to mention that I worked as a long-haul trucker for almost 2 years in my early 20s, and I never met a trucker who had as foul a mouth as my dear mother. And she had all her $10 words out that day, flinging them at this creature. At one point she hauled off and slapped him, and the creature reacted almost comedically, like he was really offended by her choosing to do that. He returned the favor, and she was literally lifted off the ground by his slap before she landed on her ass. Now, any other woman on the planet, you'd feel terrible witnessing such violence being used against her. But when I saw my mom knocked on her butt, I actually felt sorry for the dog man. He had no idea what she could be like when she was angry, and it was clear that the creature had made my mother furious. She rose to her feet almost like Nosferatu rising from the grave, and as she wiped the dirt off the back of her dress, I heard her listing the things she was going to do to that dog man. Terrified of what was about to happen, I snuck inside the house using the front door and went up to my room to watch the rest of this out the window from the relative safety of the second floor. I had never heard of this werewolf-looking guy before. Not from my mother, not from anyone. This was in Georgia, and I never heard of a dogman or a real werewolf down there. But the way my mother was slapping that wolfman and grabbing at his hair to tear it out, I'd have sworn that was my daddy come home down there. She was as familiar with that monster as she was with my father, and as unfriendly and hateful toward him too. A few years ago I saw a funny video on cable, when I still had cable. There was this little cat getting angry at a big old bear cub and scaring the bear cub up the tree. And when the bear cub tried to come back down, that screeching cat scared him back up to the top. The bear was 5 times larger than that little girl cat, but she was deciding what was what. When I saw that video, it reminded me of my mother, screeching at that wolf man or dog man or whatever he was. When she would take a step toward him, he would take a step back. When she would raise her hand to him, he would flinch. That's not to say that the wolfman was not a glutton for punishment, because he was. He not only kept coming back for more, but he kept getting angry all over again. My mother played him like a fiddle. Every time the fight seemed to be about over, she would disrespect him in such a way that he would get upset with her all over again. I had little doubt that somehow my mother had started this fight. And I also had little doubt that the argument between these two had been going on for longer than I could have imagined. Once again, my screeching cat of a mom chased the dogman back, and once again I thought the encounter was over. But then, when Mom turned her back to the beastman and began walking away, I, up in my bird's eye view seat in the window on the second floor, saw that the dogman had turned around and was heading back to my mother. He was tiptoeing quietly, sneaking up behind her, and his claws looked long and sharp. Instinctively, I threw the window open and screamed to my mother to look behind her. She turned around, seeing the wolfman already spooked by my shouting and running away. Mom stared at the retreating dogman for a while. Then she turned, and she glared up at me in the window. Pointing one of her long, bony witch fingers at me, she shouted, "Spying. You were spying on me." My mother came marching into the house and I ran out of my room. We met halfway on the staircase with me trying to run down them and out of the house, but with her blocking my exit. I was willing to sleep in the woods overnight if it meant not having to endure another of her pointless and illogical lectures, but I didn't have the option. She corralled me back up the stairs. Laugh at me if you will, but this woman had just scared off a dogman 1 minute prior. I was scared of her too. I asked her if she was okay, and I reminded her that I had shouted out the window to save her life. That only made her angrier though, as it reminded her that she had a no shouting rule in the house, and I was in the house when I shouted to save her life. She had one hand up in slap formation, and she was cornering me back to my room. She was shouting that I was a nosy busybody. The dogman was none of my beeswax, and I wasn't allowing her any privacy. Privacy to get snuck up on and killed, I asked defiantly. Well, that was the end of the Cold War, and the beginning of the nuclear one. I got punished by my dad sometimes when I did something wrong. I got punished by my mom when her mood swinged. And somehow her punishments hurt a lot more than Dad's. It was like he knew how to pull his punches, but she always saw herself as the victim of the rest of us, and all she was doing was trying to get even with her husband and her kids, who were all so horrible to her. She was insanity given a body, but I had thought that at least she was bland and predictable. I had no idea she had a monster man that she was involved in some kind of negative physical relationship with. I'm not saying she was mating with him, at least God I hope not. I only mean physical in the sense that she kept slapping this poor doggy dude around. Like I said, he got a few good ones in too, but it seemed that she was the main aggressor. Still, if he had just stayed away from her, there would have been no conflict. Mom wasn't going to go into the woods looking for Dogman, but I don't think the creature came around hoping to hurt my mother. I think it liked her. I wasn't sure exactly what I meant by that for years, and I still don't want to think about it too much. But the monster wanted her company and was willing to get whacked with a broom handle just to get her attention. And why was she angry that I saw them together? I can understand her never bringing the werewolf up with me before I saw it, but why would she be angry when I did? See it, I mean. Well, I just didn't know for decades because I was forbidden to ask her about it. I got spanked. I got grounded. I watched as she took 10 random vinyl records out of my collection and bent them until they snapped. I forget the rest of the punishments, but there were more. Almost made me wish I had let the dogman eat her. Actually, I shouldn't say almost. I regretted warning her of the dogman attack every day until her funeral, and still on occasional days afterward. One time I came to visit her a few days before Christmas, and I was gonna stay a week, to spend the holiday with her. I brought up the subject of the dogman I had seen her slap around, and she chased me out of the house with a kitchen knife. In fact, that's my final memory of dear old Mom, her running down her driveway brandishing a knife at me as I pulled away and out of her life permanently and for good. I did ask my sister recently if she ever heard about Mom's dogman playmate, and she told me it had been Mom's pet when it was young. But when it started walking around on its hind legs, Mom called it the son of Satan and banished it from her house. Mom made my sister and Dad swear to never talk again about the dogman, so I guess neither of them did. But my sister didn't know it kept coming back around. She told me the last time she saw the dogman I was only around 2 years old. I have no memories of it except for the ones I've already shared with you. My sister says the dog was just there in the yard one morning when it was a puppy. Maybe someone else left it there. It was inside our fence. That's what my sister thinks. Someone else left it with us. Maybe someone who knew it would grow up to be an upright walking kind of a canine. I just don't know. Now I regret never bringing this up with my father. If the pup lived in the house when I was a baby, my father would have probably known the creature personally. I bet he would have had more info than my sister could remember at least. I wish we owned a camera at the time so I could show you some over-the-head grainy photo taken from my bedroom window. In truth, though, if we had owned a camera, we wouldn't have owned film. That was my childhood. One of my shrinks back in the early 2000s told me that I shouldn't be sad that the dogman didn't eat my mom. I should be happy that I got to see a dogman, and that he didn't eat me.
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you a fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, hey, it's a coloring book, hooray. Okay, link is in the description.
We've gotten some new channel members and PayPal Club members recently, and we're planning to thank each one of you, as well as to unveil 2 brand new Secret Uncensored members-only stories this weekend. But first, we've got to thank and pay tribute to the queen of our channel members, Kathy Barrickman. Kathy says she's taking it day by day, but her situation has not gotten better. The fact that she's still leaving comments and making donations demonstrates what a saint this woman is. That's why she's the Wildcat Wolverine Werewolf Queen, and she always will be. We thank her before every single episode, and I plan to continue always doing that. Thank you, Kathy Barrickman. Nobody's as cool as Kathy, but you can join the same club as her. Here's our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to explain how. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.